The students mocked the African-American teenager who came to school in military fatigues until his father arrived in a Black Hawk helicopter on the athletic field. However, before this shocking revelation occurred, the entire student body at Lincoln High School needed to experience a harsh reality check about making assumptions based on someone's looks. The Army uniform hung loosely on Kevin Washington's slender 16-year-old body, oversized by 2 full sizes. Yet he carried himself with pride that stood in stark opposition to the mockery reverberating throughout the school corridors that Tuesday morning. His sleeves, which he had rolled up, exposed arms that shook slightly, not from terror, but from a restrained fury that only individuals who have encountered genuine warfare can possess. "Check out the discount store soldier," Tyler Morrison yelled out. The star quarterback's arrogance was disproportionate to his intelligence. He strutted down the halls with his entourage of followers, all cackling like predators who had found defenseless prey. Someone should inform Kevin that Halloween comes in October, not now. Kevin maintained his forward gaze, his steps creating a different rhythm. These weren't the hesitant footfalls of a typical adolescent, but rather the measured pace of someone raised on military discipline, understanding that honor comes through structure, not social status. Kevin's morning routine had remained unchanged since his arrival at this institution 3 months prior. His mother, employed as a healthcare worker at the base medical facility, had obtained a job transfer following his father's deployment to a confidential overseas assignment. What remained unknown to everyone, and Kevin deliberately kept secret, was that this particular day represented exactly 12 months since his last conversation with the most significant person in his world. "Listen here, newcomer." Ashley Bennett's piercing voice sliced through the atmosphere like a blade. She represented the type of student who controlled the school through rumors and malice masked as brutal honesty. "You realize this is an educational institution, not a war zone, correct? Or are you too ignorant to recognize the distinction?" Kevin paused at his storage compartment, his trained fingers operating the lock mechanism with military efficiency. Attached inside the door was a weathered photograph of a uniformed man, his chest decorated with commendations, standing beside a younger version of Kevin. The picture was positioned so only he could view it, a concealed weapon saved for the appropriate moment. "Perhaps he's getting ready for the Second World War," Cameron Davis chuckled. The class entertainer transformed every scenario into comedic material. Or maybe his longing for his military father who's always absent. For an instant, Kevin shut his eyes and tightened his hands into fists. When he reopened them, something had shifted in his expression. Rather than the hopelessness or sorrow everyone anticipated, there was a threatening calmness of someone who understood precisely what advantage he possessed and was simply waiting for the ideal moment to reveal it. "Continue your laughter," Kevin whispered so softly only he could detect it. "Keep laughing while the opportunity remains." These affluent adolescents were unaware that each chuckle, every harsh remark, every instance of degradation was being methodically recorded in the consciousness of a young person who had discovered from childhood that optimal military tactics don't involve attacking when adversaries anticipate it, but rather waiting until they feel entirely confident in their dominance. Should this narrative of bias and triumph over hardship resonate with you, remember to follow the channel to discover how a simple moment of shame would transform into the trigger for a truth that nobody at Lincoln High would ever forget. Standing there before all the contemptuous gazes, Kevin remained steadfast like a guardian protecting a secret too significant to reveal prematurely. Sometimes the most satisfying retribution doesn't originate from our own actions. It descends from above with a thunderous sound of rotors that make the earth tremble. The intensification of cruelty commenced during the lunch break when Tyler Morrison determined that ridicule alone was insufficient. He required a larger audience for a more public and devastating humiliation. The school playground became the ideal venue for his cruel spectacle. "Everyone gather around," Tyler announced, climbing onto a picnic table while his voice carried across the packed courtyard. "Our miniature soldier will demonstrate some military techniques for us. Come on, Kevin, perform some push-ups for the audience." Numerous mobile devices immediately appeared, prepared to document every moment of the impending humiliation. The crowd assembled in a circle like hungry observers in a contemporary gladiatorial arena. Ashley Bennett recorded with malicious grin, already envisioning the social media engagement she would receive from posting this content. Kevin stayed perfectly still, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon as if participating in an actual military formation. His erect stance and regulated breathing created a sharp contrast to the disorder surrounding him. Any observant witness would notice something unsettling about this tranquility, as though he had already weathered far worse storms in a group of pampered teenagers. "What's the matter?" Silent treatment. Cameron Davis moved closer, his tone dripping with malice. "Are you awaiting command from your fictional commanding officer? I'll bet your father isn't even a genuine serviceman. He's likely just another shopping center security officer pretending to have importance." The reference to his father triggered something barely perceptible in Kevin's expression. It wasn't obvious anger or despair, quite the opposite. An almost undetectable smile briefly appeared at the edge of his mouth, so fleeting that only someone monitoring his every gesture could have observed it. This was the smile of someone who had just heard the most absurd irony imaginable. These privileged children were oblivious to the fact that Kevin Washington had been raised on military installations across the globe. While they entertained themselves with video games, he mastered Morse code from actual soldiers. While they protested about tidying their bedrooms, he was folding uniforms with exact precision at age 7. "You know something?" Tyler, the quarterback, descended from the table and approached Kevin menacingly. "I'll offer you some free advice. Soldier boy, this place isn't meant for individuals like you. Why don't you return to the poor neighborhood where you discovered that costume?" The term costume resonated across the courtyard like a gunshot. Several students laughed, but others, the more perceptive ones, started noticing something unusual. Kevin wasn't retreating. He wasn't stumbling over explanations. He wasn't displaying any typical characteristics of a bullying victim. Instead, he appeared to be evaluating the circumstances. Kevin was indeed doing exactly that. Throughout his 17 years of existence, he had observed his father handle conflicts numerous times. The initial lesson he had absorbed was never to respond during emotional peaks. Watch, analyze, strategize, then act, and that was precisely his current approach. Kevin's mobile phone vibrated quietly in his pocket, a message invisible to others, yet it caused his eyes to illuminate with renewed intensity. It was an update regarding something he had anticipated for months, a confirmation that would transform this moment of shame into the catalyst for a devastating revelation. "Tyler," Kevin spoke for the first time, his voice steady and controlled, cutting through the air like a sharp instrument. "Are you certain you wish to proceed with this? Because I can assure you of one thing, you'll remember this day for your entire life." The crowd became silent momentarily. Kevin's voice contained something, a quiet command that contradicted the victim image everyone had constructed mentally. Tyler experienced an involuntary chill along his spine, but his arrogance overshadowed his survival instincts. "Oh, how frightening!" Tyler laughed loudly, attempting to regain narrative control. "What will you do? Summon your daddy to assault me? Oh, wait, I'm sure he's not available. Genuine military personnel don't have time for disappointing children." Kevin closed his eyes briefly, not from pain, but from what seemed almost like sympathy. When he reopened them, there was disturbing serenity present. "Tyler," he said quietly, "my father is nearer than you realize. Actually, he's closer than anyone at this school could ever conceive." Ashley paused the recording momentarily, bewildered by the sudden shift in dynamics. Something about Kevin's behavior didn't make sense. He no longer resembled a victim. He looked like someone who knew exactly what he was doing. The bell chimed, indicating the break's conclusion, but the tension remained thick in the atmosphere. Students began dispersing, yet many continued glancing back, sensing they had missed something significant in that exchange. Kevin walked calmly toward the building, his footsteps maintaining the same military rhythm as always. However, now there was something different. A quiet expectation, as if he were counting down to something no one else could anticipate. His phone vibrated again in his pocket. This time it contained a 5-word message that accelerated his heartbeat. "Operation approved. Arrival confirmed. Tomorrow." Tyler and his group laughed and scattered, convinced they had established their superiority over another easy target. They were unaware they had just provoked something years beyond their understanding, and that within 24 hours, their perception of power and privilege would shatter in such a public and devastating manner that it would transform Lincoln High permanently. Each new humiliation only strengthened something within Kevin that his tormentors couldn't perceive, a silent force powered by the very injustice they attempted to impose. These privileged teenagers were oblivious to the fact that every act of contempt was writing their own defeat, one incident at a time. The following morning, Kevin arrived at school an hour ahead of schedule. The vacant parking area echoed only with his military footsteps as he proceeded directly to the administrative office. Something had changed about his bearing. No longer the controlled resignation of yesterday, but a quiet resolve that made the surrounding air vibrate with contained energy. "May I assist you, dear?" inquired Mrs. Rodriguez, the administrative assistant, observing curiously the young man who seldom interacted with school personnel. "I need to speak with Principal Peterson regarding today's event." Kevin placed a sealed envelope on the counter, his words carrying an authority that didn't correspond to his apparent age. Mrs. Rodriguez frowned in confusion. "What event?" "We don't have any special activities scheduled for today." However, as she opened the envelope and quickly scanned the contents, her eyes widened. "Oh my goodness, is this legitimate?" Kevin simply nodded, a subtle smile touching his mouth's corner. "Very legitimate. And it commences at 2 o'clock precisely. I recommend you prepare the gymnasium sound system and clear the football field." As Mrs. Rodriguez hurried to locate Principal Peterson, Kevin walked calmly through the empty corridors. Each step resonated like a countdown, each breath controlled like a soldier preparing for the decisive confrontation. Lincoln High was unaware that Kevin had spent the previous 3 months not merely enduring humiliations, but documenting each one. Every racist remark, every joke about his father, every cruel moment had been carefully recorded, not for petty vengeance, but as evidence for a much larger purpose. Tyler Morrison arrived at school 20 minutes later, his truck roaring through the parking lot, as usual to announce his presence. He discovered Kevin standing calmly beside his locker, but something was different in the atmosphere. Other students whispered more than normal, and some staff members appeared agitated. "Hey there, little soldier," Tyler approached with his typical cruel smile. "Did you sleep with your military teddy bear last night?" Kevin turned slowly, his eyes meeting the quarterback with an intensity that made the boy involuntarily step backward. "Are you absolutely certain you want to continue this? Because after 2 o'clock, there's no reversing course." Ashley Bennett and Cameron Davis approached, drawn by the tension in the air. Ashley already held her phone, ready to film another moment of entertainment at Kevin's expense. "Dude, are you losing your mind?" Cameron laughed nervously. "What's this about 2 o'clock in the afternoon? Are you going to summon your daddy's private military?" The mention of his father made Kevin close his eyes momentarily, not in pain, but in something resembling anticipation. When he opened them again, there was disturbing calmness there, as if he knew exactly what was approaching. "You'll discover in a few hours," Kevin said softly, closing his locker with a definitive click. "And when you do, remember this moment. Remember every word you spoke, every laugh you laughed, every second you chose cruelty towards someone you assumed was defenseless." The bell rang, but for the first time in months, Kevin didn't immediately proceed to class. Instead, he walked calmly toward the gymnasium where Principal Peterson awaited him with a look of shock and nervousness. "Kevin, I wasn't aware. None of us knew," Peterson stammered, holding the paper Mrs. Rodriguez had given him. "This will change everything, the entire school, all the students." "It was intended this way," Kevin replied calmly. 3 months of silence, 3 months of preparation. My father always said the best strategy isn't attacking when the enemy expects it, but when they feel most secure in their superiority. During the morning break, strange rumors began circulating throughout the school. Staff members whispered in hallways. The principal had canceled all afternoon meetings, and there was an inexplicable energy in the air. Tyler and his crew attempted to pressure Kevin for answers, but he simply smiled and continued his activities. "Something strange is happening," Ashley whispered to Brittany Walsh during lunch. "The teachers are acting like something major is about to occur, and that weird Kevin seems different today." "Different how?" Brittany asked, biting into her organic salad while watching Kevin sitting alone at his usual table. Confident, like he knows something we don't. At the adjacent table, Kevin ate his sandwich silently, but his eyes occasionally drifted to the wall clock. 1 hour and 15 minutes remaining. His hand discreetly touched the phone in his pocket, where a recent message simply read, "ETA confirmed. Alpha team in position." Tyler Morrison, Ashley Bennett, and all the other privileged students at Lincoln High were unaware that Kevin Washington wasn't merely the son of some military personnel. He was the son of Colonel James Washington, commander of the 3rd Airborne Division, a decorated veteran of 3 international conflicts, and one of the United States Armed Forces' most respected officers. Today, after 3 years serving on classified missions worldwide, Colonel Washington was returning home. Not quietly, not discreetly, but in a manner that would permanently engrave in every person's memory who had ever underestimated his son the importance of treating everyone with dignity and respect. Kevin finished his lunch and walked calmly toward the football field where he could already detect a distant sound on the horizon, a sound that made his heart race and his eyes shine with pride and anticipation. It was while everyone laughed that something unexpected began forming, not just in the blue sky above Lincoln High, but primarily in Kevin's determined gaze, which now shone with an intensity that made some present realize that something extraordinary was about to completely rewrite the social hierarchy of that school forever. At precisely 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the initial sound emerged as a distant whisper in the blue sky above Lincoln High. Within seconds, that whisper transformed into a deafening roar that shook the school windows in their frames. Tyler Morrison was in the middle of another cruel performance in the courtyard when the noise began. "Look, everyone, our little soldier is waiting for Daddy to come home," he shouted to the crowd of students gathered around Kevin. "I bet he won't even appear." That's when the enormous shadow passed overhead. The Black Hawk UH-60 Lima Charlie rose from the horizon like a physical manifestation of American military power. Its twin turbines created a gale that forced all students to seek cover. The helicopter was massive, painted in official military green with the 3rd Airborne Division's insignia gleaming in the afternoon sun. Ashley Bennett dropped her phone on the concrete floor, the screen cracking as she watched, mouth agape, as the military aircraft executed a perfect approach toward the football field. This can't be happening," she stammered, her voice barely audible above the turbine roar. Kevin remained exactly where he stood, but now his posture had completely changed. He was no longer the boy who silently endured humiliation. He was a young soldier standing at attention, awaiting his commander's arrival. The helicopter landed on the football field with surgical precision, its wheels touching the grass exactly on the 50-yard line. Before the turbines even began slowing, the side door slid open and a figure in full dress uniform emerged from the aircraft. Colonel James Washington stood 6 feet tall with broad shoulders covered by an impeccable uniform adorned with medals and decorations that narrated 3 decades of exemplary military service. His green beret was positioned at the perfect military angle. When his eyes swept across the crowd of students huddled around the field, there was the unshakable authority of someone who had commanded men in combat zones. "Oh my God," whispered Cameron Davis, his face turning pale as the situation's reality began sinking in. That's really his father." Behind the colonel, 3 more officers emerged from the helicopter, all in full dress uniform, marching in perfect formation toward the field center where Kevin awaited them. Principal Peterson ran desperately down the sideline, trying to reach the site of the unannounced ceremony that was about to transform Lincoln High into something completely different. Tyler Morrison felt his legs weaken as he realized the magnitude of his ignorance. For months, he had mocked the son of one of America's most decorated military officers. His jokes about fake soldiers and absent fathers now echoed in his mind like social death sentences. "Attention!" Colonel Washington's voice cut through the air like a knife, and instantly everyone present, students, teachers, staff, fell silent. His presence commanded respect in a way none of these privileged teenagers had ever experienced before. Kevin walked toward his father with perfect military posture he had practiced since childhood. When he was 3 feet away, he stopped and executed a flawless salute. "Colonel Washington," he said in a loud, clear voice, requesting permission to report mission accomplished. The colonel returned the salute with obvious pride shining in his eyes. "Permission granted, Private Washington. Present your report." Kevin turned to face the silent crowd of classmates who had tormented him for months. His voice was clear, controlled, but laden with dignity that made several students lower their eyes in shame. "Over the past 90 days, I have conducted a social reconnaissance operation at this institution. I have systematically documented instances of racial discrimination, systematic bullying, and institutional prejudice." Kevin removed a sealed envelope from his pocket. This report contains photographic evidence, audio recordings, and testimonials that will be forwarded to the school district and the State Department of Education. Ashley Bennett began crying silently as she realized every cruel moment, every malicious laugh, every racist comment had been carefully documented by someone she had completely underestimated. Furthermore, Kevin continued, his voice growing stronger, I have established contact with 17 military families in this region whose children have reported similar experiences at various educational institutions. A federal investigation into patterns of discrimination in public schools will be launched next week. Colonel Washington nodded approvingly before addressing the stunned crowd. My son has demonstrated the same courage and integrity that I expect from any soldier under my command. He endured adversity, maintained his dignity, and carried out his mission with military precision. Tyler Morrison was visibly shaking now, tears streaming down his face as he realized he had spent months humiliating the son of a military hero. His jokes about fake soldiers and absent fathers now sounded like echoes of his own cruel ignorance. Kevin, the colonel continued, placing his hand on his son's shoulder, you have proven that true character is not measured by how easily one surrenders to adversity, but by the dignity with which one faces it. As father and son embrace in the center of the field under the soothing roar of the Black Hawk's turbines, all of Lincoln High witnessed a lesson that no textbook could ever teach, that real heroes walk among us, carrying their battles in silence until the moment comes to show what they are truly made of. As revelations piled up and masks fell away, one question remained. Would these privileged young people finally learn the difference between true power and mere arrogance, or would it take their families facing the consequences of a federal investigation to understand the true meaning of responsibility and respect? 6 months after the day that became known as Black Hawk Landing, Lincoln High was a completely different school. Kevin Washington was no longer the quiet kid who endured humiliation. He was a student council president, elected by a landslide of votes from classmates who finally understood the true meaning of leadership. The federal investigation launched by his report had uncovered a systematic pattern of discrimination that extended far beyond the school walls. 17 school districts were required to implement diversity programs, and Lincoln High became a national model for how institutions can transform themselves when confronted with their own failings. Tyler Morrison never fully recovered from the public humiliation. The video of the moment he realized he had spent months mocking the son of a military hero went viral, with over 5 million views. His chances of getting a college scholarship evaporated when recruiters discovered his history of racist bullying documented in the federal report. He finished high school virtually isolated, carrying the weight of having become a national symbol of privileged ignorance. Ashley Bennett desperately tried to rebuild her online image, but every post was flooded with comments reminding her of a cruelty captured on film. Her aspirations to become a digital influencer died when brands refused to associate themselves with someone who had systematically attacked a young soldier. She ended up deleting all her social media accounts and transferring to a school in another state where she tried to start over, far from the consequences of her actions. Cameron Davis, the class clown, discovered that his jokes about soldiers and military families had made him persona non grata in a community that deeply respected military service. His own grandfather, a Vietnam War veteran, was so ashamed that he refused to speak to his grandson for months. But the most significant transformation took place within the school itself. Kevin's report not only documented individual cases of bullying, it revealed how the administration had systematically ignored patterns of discrimination. Principal Peterson was replaced by a black educator with experience in inclusion programs, and new protocols were implemented to protect minority students. Kevin discovered that his strategy of documenting everything had set a legal precedent. Civil rights lawyers began using his case as a model for suing other institutions. Military colleges offered him full scholarships, impressed not only by his intelligence but by his maturity in turning personal injustice into systemic change. Colonel Washington visited the school regularly now, no longer as a dramatic surprise but as a guest speaker at leadership programs. His constant presence reminded the entire school community that real heroes exist and that often their children walk silently among us, carrying legacies of courage that are only revealed when tested by adversity. During one of these lectures, 6 months after the incident, Tyler Morrison hesitantly approached Kevin after the presentation. His hands were shaking and tears were streaming down his face when he finally found the courage to speak. Kevin, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know that those were the worst months of my life. Not because I lost popularity or scholarships, but because I finally understood what a terrible person I had become. Kevin looked at him for a moment, seeing no longer the arrogant bully but a broken young man who had learned a devastating lesson about consequences. "Tyler," he replied calmly, "my father always taught me that true character is revealed not when everything is going well, but when we face the consequences of our choices. You're facing yours. The question is, what kind of man will you choose to be from here on out?" The conversation was overheard by dozens of students who witnessed a moment of grace and maturity that no traditional classroom could teach. Kevin hadn't just defeated his oppressors. He had risen above the need for petty revenge, demonstrating the kind of leadership that transforms entire institutions. 2 years later, Kevin graduated as valedictorian. His speech was broadcast nationally as an example of how young people can face adversity with dignity and purpose. He was accepted to West Point Military Academy on a full scholarship, following in his father's footsteps, but now with a deep understanding of how to use privilege and power to protect the vulnerable rather than oppress them. Tyler Morrison sent a letter of recommendation to the military academy, describing how Kevin had demonstrated true leadership by turning a situation of injustice into an opportunity for collective growth. It was one of the few positive things Tyler was able to do to try to repair the damage he had caused. The lesson Lincoln High learned spread far beyond its walls, that every person carries stories, struggles, and legacies that we can't see at first glance. That judging someone by their appearance or background is not only morally wrong but strategically foolish, because we never know when that different kid might be the child of someone with the power to change our life forever. Kevin Washington proved that the best revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you, but building something so extraordinary that it turns injustice into inspiration. He used every moment of humiliation as fuel to create change that would protect other young people from facing what he had faced. 4 years ago, Kevin was just another kid being humiliated for wearing his father's uniform. Today, he is a national symbol of how to respond to injustice with intelligence, courage, and unshakable dignity. Kevin's real victory wasn't humiliating his oppressors. It was transforming them into better people while building a legacy that honored both his own strength and his father's sacrifice. He discovered that when we confront prejudice with truth and dignity, we don't just win, we lift up the entire society around us. If this story of transformation and justice has inspired you, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that sometimes heroes walk quietly among us, waiting only for the right moment to show that true strength manifests itself through integrity, not revenge.